Good morning. It's December 24th. It's Christmas Eve, and I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. This is to my liberal friends. For years, the story was out there, and some reporter could have covered it. If they had, they might have won a Pulitzer Prize. The story I'm talking about is the decline, both physically and mentally, of President Joe Biden. Well, it's now out in the open, and some in the media are pretending they're covering it. But why did they ignore it for the past 4 years? There were some conservative writers and media outlets that tried to cover the story, but they were immediately castigated by the vast majority of the media and the administration itself. If Joe Biden stumbled and the video was shown, it was called a cheap fake. If he misspoke, the White House staff immediately cleaned it up. We all saw it with our own eyes, but did not know what to think when we were told it was not true. And how many times did we see President Biden, when appearing in public, have a little cheat sheet? He was told which reporters to call on, in what order. Repeatedly, we saw aides giving him directions on where to go and even how to exit the stage. And I have at times felt like he was using a small earpiece when someone was guiding him. I remember on one occasion, as he was exiting the stage, he said, quote, "Salute the Marine," which was obviously what someone was reminding him to do. It was rare that Joe Biden held press conferences where anyone was able to ask him questions, and when he did, as I said, he was instructed on who to call on. It's suggested, and has been said, the reporters were asked to submit their questions in advance, and they would allow staff to script the answer. When he deviated from his instruction, he said things like, quote, "I'll get in trouble," simply for answering questions. Why would the President of the United States get in trouble for responding to the media? To their credit, the Wall Street Journal has attempted to cover the story, but when they made any report that suggested that Joe Biden was not up to the job, they were immediately discredited by both the administration and the liberal media who were cheerleading for Biden. Then came the famous debate in June between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. To millions of Americans that tuned in for that debate, they saw a feeble and diminished president of the United States who was unable to accurately answer any question and put together any coherent thoughts. The most famous line of the debate was when the moderators asked Donald Trump if he wanted to respond to something Biden had said about Medicare. Trump simply replied by saying, quote, "I don't know what he said, and I don't think he does either," end quote. So why has this cognitive decline not gotten the wide scrutiny it deserved? And why has there been no reporting even about who is actually running the government? The answers to both questions are as obvious as they are infuriating. The legacy media outlets and their activist offshoots don't want the American people to know the truth. They're not covering the White House. They were covering up for the White House. Democrats with press passes, that's what they were. And they put their partisan allegiance ahead of their professional responsibility in their country. By not even trying to pierce the fog spun by Biden's enablers, the Washington media became his co-conspirators. But last week, the Wall Street Journal really blew the lid off the story with a lengthy report on the failing ability of Joe Biden to physically and mentally measure up to the job. In the report, they talked about how a small inner circle of staff protected Biden and kept him from situations he could not function correctly. According to the Wall Street Journal, quote, "Interactions between Biden and many of his cabinet members were relatively infrequent and often tightly scripted. At least one cabinet member stopped requesting calls with the president because it was clear that such requests wouldn't be welcome, and that's according to a former senior cabinet aide." We all remember the interview with Special Counsel Robert Hur, where he stated that Biden was, quote, "sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory," end quote. But according to the Journal, quote, "the prep sessions took about 3 hours a day for about a week ahead of the interview, according to a person familiar with the preparation. During those sessions, Biden's energy levels were up and down. He couldn't recall lines his team had previously discussed with him." Well, the actual interview didn't go well. Transcripts showed multiple blunders, including Biden didn't initially recall that in prep sessions he'd been shown his own handwritten memo arguing against a surge of troops in Afghanistan. The Journal also reported, quote, "at some events, the Biden campaign printed the pre-approved questions on note cards and gave donors the cards to read the questions. Even with all these steps, Biden made flubs, which confounded the donors who knew that Biden had the questions ahead of time." On July 13th of this year, Biden held an uncomfortable call with a group of Democratic lawmakers called the New Democratic Coalition, aimed at reassuring them about his ability to stay in the race. The president told participants that polling showed he was doing fine. He became angry when challenged, according to lawmakers on the call. At one point, Biden looked up and abruptly told the group he had to go to church. Some lawmakers on the call believed someone behind the camera was shutting it down. Biden dropped out of the race 8 days later. The people that should be ashamed are the complicit press corps that refuse to show any interest in an aging and declining president. Some are now trying to excuse themselves. Chris Cillizza, who was CNN's editor-at-large before leaving the network in 2022, spoke candidly about his lack of journalistic curiosity about Biden's condition to serve, following a pair of damning reports this week from the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal that shed light on the president's diminished state. Quoting Cillizza, "As a reporter, I have a confession to make. I should have pushed harder earlier for more information about Joe Biden's mental and physical well-being and any signs of decline," end quote. So yes, the press should have pressed harder, but that would have meant helping Trump at the expense of Biden, and they could not bring themselves to shed their partisan views and do their job. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, hit the subscribe button on YouTube. If you're on TikTok, move over to YouTube if you like it, because TikTok may not be here. Anyway, thanks for listening.